Welcoming back to the program today, John Guandolo, who's a former Marine and FBI agent who now runs the organization Understanding the Threat, Strategic Operational Training and Consulting on the Threat of the Global Islamic Movement. John, it's great to have you back, not only because the FBI has become such a topic of newsworthiness over the last few years, but also just because it's great to follow up with folks we've interviewed. We had you on back in 2013. And at the time, you talked to us about how you believe that then CIA director nominee John Brennan had been recruited by Saudi Arabia and converted to Islam. Now that he has come and gone, do you still stand by that? Do you believe John Brennan was secretly or is secretly a Muslim?
Well, we know, as a matter of fact, from my own sources who were in Saudi Arabia when John Brennan was a station chief, that he said the Shahada in the presence of Saudi officials, including Mabahith, Saudi intelligence officials. We now have retired station chief from the CIA, Brad Johnson, who has now come out publicly and said it was well known and is well known in the CIA that John Brennan converted to Islam. And he had heard that from many people who had direct knowledge and heard things direct from Mr. Brennan. So I don't think that is a question anymore, although some people would try to make it. So yes, I obviously stand by my comments.
Why don't you think that it's been reported in any sort of investigative news outlet or corporate media, or even really in much independent media, that the former CIA director had converted to Islam but sort of kept that secret? Why? That seems like it would be a story that would be for the media outlets that make money from getting clicks and so on. Wouldn't they want to publish such an explosive story? Why wouldn't they?
I would think so, but I think there are many what I would call explosive stories that aren't being published. Certainly not by what I would call, I'm going to use the term mainstream media since I think many of your viewers will know what I'm talking about, but sure. The typical ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, that they're not covering this story. But I would also say he was not the only CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia that converted to Islam.
Now, let me ask you this, John, because I want to see if we can define some of those terms. Like when you say, so you said he recited, it's the Shahada. I hope I'm not speaking incorrectly. It's the Shahada that he recited?
Correct.
Yeah. So like I'm putatively Jewish, right? If I go to, I don't know, a Catholic church and get baptized, a Catholic might say David Pakman is now Catholic. But if I didn't really do it in a serious manner, if I don't identify as Catholic, doesn't really matter that I was, quote, baptized, right? Like that wouldn't make me Catholic any more than if I just right now recited the Shahada would. So do you agree with that, or do you believe that something irreversible sort of happens when you say a certain thing, or if I were baptized?
Right. Well, I think the premise of your question is not quite right. So if you, first of all, you would not be allowed to be baptized in the example you gave in a Catholic church unless you had gone through, as an adult, if you had gone through a certain process that's set up for you to begin your initiation into the church. So no, you're not Catholic because the process would include baptism and your confirmation and communion.
Sure, but the same thing applies. I mean, if I did it and didn't really do it in a serious way, that's what I feel in my heart, I'm just going through the motions, am I really Catholic?
Well, so we can step away from talking about Catholicism.
Sure.
The answer is the answer is actually you don't get to do those things unless you understand what you're doing. In full faith. In Islam, the law, because Islam is a totalitarian system governed by Sharia law, yes, if you publicly say the Shahada under the circumstances that the law requires, then you have accepted Islam and have converted. And that's all it requires. And if you read what Islam teaches, you are not required to understand what the fullness of Sharia requires. They only are required to tell you enough so that you come into Islam without, and I would argue that many people are not aware that leaving Islam is a capital crime. So they only give you enough, which is exactly the opposite of how, for instance, again, staying with your example, Christianity treats it, that when you come into the full communion of the church, you know you are taught the full body of what the faith is. In Islam, they are not required to tell you. They tell you enough to get you to say the Shahada. Thereby, you are a Muslim, and once you're in, you can't leave under penalty of.
So let's play it out now. Let's say Brennan was a secret Muslim. What I observed take place under Brennan's stewardship and under President Obama were drone strikes and bombing of multiple majority Muslim countries, significant military action against ISIS. Did Brennan, as a secret Muslim, do anything as a result of being Muslim, in your estimation?
Well, he certainly supported. I mean, we could start with today and work back, but I'll bounce around to answer your question. I mean, he supported the U.S. Muslim Brotherhood, both through the actions as the counterterrorism advisor to the president and as the CIA director by not only appearing at Muslim Brotherhood functions and promoting them and advising the president to promote them, such as the Islamic Society of North America and others. The policies, if we look at what happened under President Obama, if you look at the leaders around the world that were really the only leaders that were putting the boot on the Muslim Brotherhood, Muammar Gaddafi in Syria, Assad, Mubarak in Egypt, the Obama administration removed Mubarak, had Gaddafi killed, and is trying to remove Assad. So that should be noteworthy. I mean, Muammar Gaddafi was killing more Al-Qaeda fighters than anyone else on the planet at the time. So I think that is problematic because who they were targeting were those who were honestly enemies of the United States. In other words, Gaddafi, Assad, Mubarak, and I'm not defending those three individuals, but what they were doing were keeping the global Islamic movement, specifically the Muslim Brotherhood, at bay, and we basically ripped those down, and now we see the results of that.
As a Sikh, I guess I'm confused because as a secret Muslim, wouldn't Brennan's involvement in an escalation of the droning of Muslim individuals be something that, according to his own secret religion, Islam, would send him to hell? Like, why would he agree to participate in that? Why would he further that policy that we saw escalated under Obama?
Right. Well, my first answer to somebody asking that question is, what Islamic law have you read? And if you read Islamic law, it's very clear. And when you see Muslims in conflict with other Muslims, it's always about one of two issues. Matters of Sharia or power. And so if we're going to look at the geopolitical relationships between Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, other nations like that, what happened in Libya, what's happening in Syria, you have to understand Sharia and you have to understand the power struggles. And so Sharia does provide for these things. And again, it's going to be one of those two things. It's going to be matters of Sharia and matters of power. And you've got both going on right now in the Middle East.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, to kind of like tidy it up, anything that John Brennan did as a secret Muslim CIA director that appears to be anti-Muslim was actually in furthering the interests of a power struggle in a way that would be sanctioned by Sharia law and would not condemn him to hell.
If he were actually operating according to Sharia. Now, his loyalty is based on if we just look at what we can visibly see. And I want to be clear, you're using the phrase secret Muslim secret society. I'm saying he said the Shahada. He didn't seem to be secretive about it. He's never been asked by the media directly about it, which is a little shocking since now, like I said, 6 or 7 months ago, you've got a retired, very successful station chief of the CIA and others. But
Is it shocking though?
Notably,
Maybe just no one, because I remember last time we talked, you had said, I think it was your wife who speaks Arabic, who heard transmissions about it. But that, I think, for a lot of so-called mainstream media might not be sufficient evidence to say that John Brennan converted to Islam, you know?
well, that was not me that said that. I don't have a wife that speaks Arabic, but I will say that when you have a station chief of the CIA saying that it was well known in the agency that he had converted to Islam, I think that's a very powerful statement. And the fact that the media ignores that, I can't subscribe to why they would do that.
Yeah, it's weird.
All I'm saying is if you look at Mr. Brennan's actions, he clearly supports the Muslim Brotherhood. The President of the United States, who was advised by Mr. Brennan, both as a CT advisor and as the CIA director of Central Intelligence, openly supported the Muslim Brotherhood against a sitting leader in Egypt, Mubarak, who was keeping the Muslim Brotherhood at bay. And now, after that revolution that we supported that overthrew Mubarak, now there was the counter-revolution and we have a non-Muslim Brotherhood government. We see the Muslim Brotherhood locked up. We see stability back in Egypt. But the point is, what we see is, and what we saw were Mr. Brennan's actions were pro-revolutionary and pro-supportive of the Muslim Brotherhood. So that's, I mean, those are just facts on the table that I can't imagine that anybody could dispute at this point.
Wow. John, in the limited time we have left, as a former FBI guy, how do you assess Robert Mueller's handling of the Trump-Russia investigation?
Well, since as of today, there is no evidence that the President of the United States in any way took actions with a foreign government that affected U.S. elections. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. Mrs. Clinton's campaign definitely did. As a matter of fact, they supported the FISA application that went to a FISA court, which had information that was objectively untrue and omitted information that would have brought significant question to that FISA application that was submitted. And by the way,
but hold on, John, I have to interrupt though. I have to interrupt. Isn't it true that there is substantially more evidence to support Trump-Russia collusion than John Brennan being a Muslim, right? I mean, you've got the Trump Tower meeting, you've got the indictments, guilty pleas. Well, like, what's your standard of evidence for saying that it's obvious that John Brennan's a secret Muslim, but there's no reason to even look into Trump-Russia collusion? How do you come to that conclusion?
I didn't say there was no reason not to look into it if there are real accusations and real basis of fact. Right now, there is not one fact on the table that Mr. Trump worked with the government of Russia, which is the accusation, in order to affect U.S. elections. There is no evidence of that.
That's not true. If you believe his attorney, Michael Cohen, he knew about and went forward with a meeting with Russian agents in Trump Tower, specifically to receive information from them meant to be damaging to Hillary Clinton to improve his chances of winning the election. Now, you might say it hasn't been proven in court yet. That's fine, but that's a specific allegation at this time that's being investigated.
It's an allegation that's unproven. There is no evidence on the table. Mr. Mueller himself, if you look at what he's put on the table that are facts that we can grasp onto, that is not one of them that's on the table.
Well, Mueller's running an investigation. His job is not to make public all the evidence he has. He's running an investigation, right? You were at the FBI. You know that they don't make the public aware of every piece of evidence they have. Wouldn't make any sense.
Of course not.
Okay.
I agree with you there. But the fact is we do not have evidence that Mr. Trump colluded or worked with, and specifically worked with a foreign government, any foreign government, in order to affect the elections, when in fact there is a substantial amount of evidence that Mrs. Clinton did, among other things. I mean, the fact that she, and it appears that the President of the United States, now with the evidence that is, as an investigator, we can't say for sure, but there is a lot of evidence that points to the fact that Mr. Clapper, Mr. Brennan, and the President himself knew that FISA application went in with information that was knowingly false to spy on U.S. citizens, including a candidate for the President of the United States, which is in violation of federal law.
Okay, unfortunately, we can't adjudicate that right now, but I do appreciate John Guandolo, former Marine and FBI agent, giving our audience an update on where he is on the Brennan Muslim issue and also on the Trump-Russia investigation. John, appreciate you taking the time to come back and talk to us.
Thank you, and I appreciate your time to speak with you. Thank you.